So the collective unconscious was created by Carl Jung, and it's what explains how and why different cultures and stories and mythologies have so many similarities, despite them never interacting or having inspiration or anything like that. So, for example, the similarities take the form of archetypes, which are like the trickster, the old wise man, etc., and different mythological and literary characters who represent these archetypes. So, for example, the trickster can be from like Loki from Norse mythology, or the Joker from Batman and stuff like that. So, in the Persona series, this is shared by all species on Earth instead of just humans, and this is basically where the Persona shadows, gods, demons, etc. are from. So, for example, people didn't worship gods or anything like that. It was like people created gods, and then the gods like actually did form in reality in the collective unconscious. And basically, in every game, it shows up in Mechanic Approach on Earth, and it does that like 2 seconds into every game, so it's not a spoiler. Shut up. And yeah, so sometimes they're like alternate layers of reality, sometimes they're like alternate dimensions. That's how that works. So then the personas, these are basically the masks that we use to represent, or that we use to interact with the world around us. So, for example, we don't talk to our moms the same way we talk to our best friend, or a stranger, or a boss, and so on. And basically, it's bad to associate yourself with a persona too heavily, because personas are very pro-social. They are basically ways that we like interact with the world around us that society would deem as acceptable, at least most of the time. So if you're like, wow, I'm just like my persona, it's like, no, you're not actually, because not everyone thinks and feels and acts in ways that are always pro-social, that are always in ways that the society would deem as acceptable. So personas in the series, basically these represent the person's ego, and in pretty much every game, each character's individual, like specific signature persona, is represented by a mythological or literary character. There are some exceptions to that, but I'm not getting into that in this video. So for example, if you're like a very lying, deceitful person, then you might have Shax as your persona, because Shax is a demon who is all about deceiving people, stealing their senses, and things like that. In the modern persona games, so 3, 4, and 5, pretty much only the protagonists can switch personas, while the other people only have their signature personas. Basically, if you have a change in self-perception or resolve, then you can get an ultimate persona, which represents a different character, usually a more powerful one. And then there are prime personas, which are only in some games and very limited supply. But prime personas are basically just upgraded versions of pre-existing ones. So they don't represent brand new characters or anything like that, but they still exist and are upgrades. So now we have the shadows, and these are pretty self-explanatory. They are basically what people don't like to accept or broadcast, or sometimes even what they don't like to acknowledge as being themselves whatsoever. A lot of defense mechanisms, like projection, are basically attempts to like avoid and put the shadow onto other people. And unlike personas, which are usually socially acceptable, the shadows are more animalistic, socially unacceptable. And in the games, shadows usually take the forms of the person who created them, at least if they're like the non-animalistic general kind that humanity as a whole has created, instead of an individual person. Usually when they're fought, the shadows will summon reverse personas. So if they're a shadow of a persona user, then they'll summon like a dark, twisted version of the persona that they're sharing the person in common with. Or if they can also take twisted forms that are basically like evil versions of the personas that they of the person who's like creating them. After shadows are defeated, they can become or empower personas, or they can return to the collective unconscious, basically just being like, okay, fuck you, I'm out of here. Now usually at a glance you can identify a shadow because they have differently colored eyes, or they just look messed up, but sometimes they look exactly like you do, and I think that's really cool. So awakenings, obviously they don't really have a real world counterpart, and I'm not going to read off every way that they can awaken because it's different in pretty much every game. But something important to note is that once a person has began awakening to a persona, the process cannot be stopped. It is possible to no longer be a persona user because you simply forget what happened, or you relinquish the power to someone else, or you can even fail to awaken to a persona overall. But for the most part, it can't be stopped or reversed, because once you've woken up, you can't go back to sleep. So the tarot is not a psychological concept, obviously, but the major arcana especially are used in every game. And this basically represents the fool's journey, one being the fool who can exist everywhere, and the end of the journey is the 21st card, but actually the 22nd, which is the world, which represents a very complete holistic person who is very powerful. And yeah. So basically the tarot, most characters and personas are represented by a major arcana. Some are regular decks like the Host deck by Aleister Crowley are used. The modern persona games have social links or confidants, which are like side stories that focus on a specific character, and those are always represented by a specific arcana. Everyone in the original game, so in Personas 1 and both 2s, everyone is a fool, but for the modern games, the protagonists are really the only fools. And yeah, thank you for watching!